with 10 minutes of delay, which is physiological, we start our session this morning. The topic is music, technology and digital revolution. We will have only 4 papers, not the 5 that are in the program, because Stefano Binet is not here. And we start right away with the first paper given by Anna Rezai. She is a PhD candidate at the University of Music and Performing Arts in Graz. She comes from Iran. She's also a santur player. And the title of her paper is Stories of Resistance Toward a Political and Cultural Ambiguity in the Social Production of Space. Please.
Hello everyone, thank you for giving me this chance to talking about a part of my PhD project dedicated to the specific kind of storytelling in Iran called naqali. Today I will focus on the female performers, which are relatively new in this scene, and their difficulties toward political and cultural ambiguity in the social production of space in Iran. For doing that, first I will tell you what is naqali, what is this kind of performance. Then I'm going to speak about the inspiration source of this performance, which called Shahnameh. And Shahnameh is an epic book which mostly, specifically by female performer, used as a medium for creating the space to tell what they want to tell. And then I'm going to the political and cultural ambiguity in Iran. I choose one case to talk about, and then I'm going to focus on the special aspects of presence of female bodies in public space in Iran, and their tactics to which they use for find their way through these difficulties, and then I'm going to conclude. Let's start with naqali. Naqali literally means carrying something from somewhere to somewhere else. And why they use this term for storytelling? Because they carry the stories from past to present. If I want to define this kind of performance, I have to say it's a one-person show, mostly and traditionally performed by males, which use their gestures, body movement, and heightened speech to convey a range of emotion to portray the characters and heroes of Shahnameh, an iconic book for Iranians. And naqal is a performer, the one who is doing this performance. These performances mostly located traditionally in coffee houses, and because of that, because of this location considered as a masculine art. Of course, not just because of the location, but also the way that these performers use their bodies and their voice in public space. For understanding it better, I choose a very short way of performing this performance in coffee houses located in south of Tehran, the more conservative parts of Tehran. And you can see that all audience are male in these coffee houses. Coffee houses mostly belong to middle class, lower class worker traditionally, again I'm saying, because the concept is changed in recent years. And for their leisure time, they go there having a tea and watching these kind of episodical, let's say, performance, which like Netflix, every night they have a new stories of Shahnameh. So let's see it together, and please pay attention how this performer uses his body and his voice. It's important because when I want to talk about female performer, you can see how it's different for them when they want to perform in public spaces. But for coming back to the naqali in general, I can say in just one short sentence, it's a craft of narrating Shahnameh's story. So what is this Shahnameh? Shahnameh, which we can translate it as a book of kings, is written in 1010 CE by Abolqasem Ferdowsi. These books, it's
spaces of cafe. So how then conceptually also you think this transmission between what is public in a real life and then what is public in the digital life?
It's a very interesting question. I don't know really the boundaries of these two, especially nowadays, which social media is part of our life. And we use it as I think again as a public space, especially in the countries that you don't have a freedom to speech, to say many things physically in the space. Maybe I have to mention that all these social media also filtering in Iran. When I went to Iran 1 month ago, suddenly I was cut out from all of the world. What they use different kind of VPNs to get access to these things. So normally Instagram is not something accepted even in general by government. So this change in space actually led this female performer to enter the scene, I think. One of these female performer told me she just performed in coffee houses and how the experience was different for her, not only for her as a performer, but also for audience. She told me that in the first days, because as I said, it's episodical thing, they don't look at her face when she was performing in the scene, but in the second day and third day they get too used to it and they started to watch her better and get familiar with situation and enjoy the stories. So it's a concept that's not very acceptable for female to be in such a scene, but social media, because it's considered as a more safe place because you are not in a physical contact, so you protect themselves in a way. You are in distance with the audience. There is a wall there, unseen wall, which help them to perform there. Behind that wall, again, another wall.
Thank you.
Yes, I think that the idea of this public space is something that is negotiable, and the threshold is moving according to the power struggle between the two competitors in a way. So it's very, very interesting to think about this concept. So thank you very much, Anna, for this fascinating paper. And we move on to the next speakers, which are Claudio Rizzoni and Elena Musumeci. Claudio is an ethnomusicologist. Actually, he is the first ethnomusicologist who got employed into the ranks of the Italian Ministry of Culture, which is a very big news for us Italians, because it was accommodatevi. And Elena, she's also in the ranks, an anthropologist in the ranks of the Ministry of Culture, and they will talk to us about their recent project, a big project, I think, is an European project on historical bells heritage between tangible and intangible.
No, va bene così. Good morning. I will read my paper because of my not so perfect English that I haven't trained for some times. This paper aims to illustrate the premises and some results of the project Historical Bells Heritage Between Tangible and Intangible, aimed at safeguarding the Italian bell heritage, both material and immaterial. The project, managed by the Ministry of Culture, represents a pilot case within the European project Horizon 2020, Polyphonia, a digital harmonizer for musical heritage knowledge, with the lead institute being the University of Bologna. Several institutes within the ministry are involved in the project. The institute responsible for the project is the Central Institute for Cataloging and Documentation, along with the Central Institute for Sound and Audiovisual Heritage, in active collaboration with the Cultural Heritage Superintendency of Genoa La Spezia. In the first part of the presentation, I will provide some brief information about Bell heritage and outline the preservation effort undertaken. Colleague Elena Musumeci will then provide details of the Bell heritage cataloging activities, which constitute one of the main objectives of the project. Bell heritage, understood in the intangible heritage sense, is somewhat surprising. In Italy, the sound of bells is part of the common experience of all people. However, strangely, few people connect these familiar sounds to figures, those of bell ringers, which are considered outdated and associated with the imagery of past eras. Even among ethnomusicologists, there are not many scholars who have investigated it. And instead, it is an area of knowledge and practices that, despite the significant spread of automatic percussion devices, the so-called electrified bell towers, is still strongly present in Italy. It is characterized by significant differentiation of tradition on a local basis, and it is predominantly transmitted orally. The lack of studies in this field is even more surprising when considering that it is characterized by some significant peculiarities that, in my opinion, constitute an additional reason for interest at the ethnomusicological level. The dynamics that have characterized the development of local techniques and repertoires are in fact the results of the complex interaction of a series of factors, not found in other orally transmitted musical traditions, and essentially depend on the particular musical instruments being played in this case. It is certainly correct from an organological perspective to consider the set of bells mounted on the bell tower as a musical instrument, but perhaps it would be more productive for our purposes to consider the entire bell tower as such. In addition to influencing the acoustic characteristics of the bell sound emission, the bell tower determines the option available in the choice of bells and their arrangement. The history of the bell tower and that of the set of bells it houses are therefore inseparable. The study of the latter also implies the study of the former, and can only be interdisciplinary, including art and architectural history. There are many elements that contribute to differentiating the sets of bells found on Italian bell towers. The number, arrangement, shape, tuning of the bells, and the material they are composed of, as well as their age and condition, which can significantly alter their sound. The structure that secure them to the bell tower and determine their oscillation possibilities, as well as the devices that allow them to be played, keyboards and connected clappers, also play a role. The combination of these elements usually follows regional construction traditions that are closely related to the musical traditions in the same areas. The strong regional differentiation that typically characterizes oral music traditions in this case is reinforced and, in a sense, made more stable by the connection with musical instruments that are also highly differentiated and cannot be moved. In Liguria, the area focused on in the research, there is a significant divide between the eastern provinces, where repertoire are characterized by more elaborated melodic profiles, with borrowing from band repertoires and popular songs, and the western part, where repertoires are characterized by the predominance of highly elaborated rhythmic patterns with limited melodic articulations. This divide corresponds to equally marked differences in the sets of bells. In the east, we have sets of 4 to 12 bells with generally accurate tuning, while in the west we have sets of 2 to 3 bells with significant tuning disparities between different sets. Even in small areas, the differences between one bell tower and another can be quite pronounced, for example, in terms of number of bells. Within the framework of the adopted preservation project, activities have so far focused on selected areas, mainly Emilia-Romagna and Liguria, but we will talk just about Liguria. In Liguria, there is an unusually rich and diverse scenario from both points of view. The musical traditions of Ligurian bell ringers have been extensively studied and documented by ethnomusicologist Mauro Balma, who conducted research on this subject starting in the 70s and particularly in the 90s. Regarding the current vitality of bell ringing traditions, there are significant differences in the territory. In western Liguria, bell ringing traditions are in a serious decline. The presence of bell ringers in the region is limited to very few elderly individuals that are no longer active. In eastern Liguria and the Genoa area, on the other hand, bell ringing traditions are still very much alive and have not experienced any interruptions. There are two bell ringers associations, the Ligurian Bell Ringers Association and the Genoa Carillons Association, each with several dozen members, many of whom are young or even children. During most ritual and festive events, bell concerts are performed, many of which are also recorded and shared on the association's social media channels. For these reasons, research activities have focused more on these areas. The collaboration of these two associations and the ethnomusicologist Mauro Balma in the project has allowed us to achieve several preservation objectives that would be otherwise inaccessible. The project aimed to safeguard through the collection, preservation, and cataloging of ethnomusicological documentation and the census, along with cataloging, of most of the bell towers and sets of bells in the area. Specifically, one of the main objectives was to undertake an integrated cataloging approach that relates musical performances and the instruments used to produce them. So, sets of bells and broadly bell towers. Regarding documentation, several collections of audiovisual and sound documents belonging to Professor Balma and the two associations were identified and acquired by the Ministry of Culture for preservation and cataloging. And we have we acquired about 800 documents. Now my colleague will explain, now, the Central Institute for Cataloging is handling the complex cataloging operation I mentioned earlier. Occhio è questa, quella.
Okay. Thank you and good morning. As just mentioned by my colleague Claudio Rizzoni, I will briefly present in more detail the cataloging project that the ICCD, the Central Institute for Cataloging and Documentation of Italian Ministry of Culture, has been working on since 2021 in cooperation with the Central Institute for Sound and Audiovisual Heritage and other local offices of the Ministry. It's important to specify that the Polyphonia project, in which we are involved, falls under the category of digital transformation calls of Horizon 2020, and it is dedicated to the development of technologies for the exploration of musical, but more broadly acoustic heritage, with the development of 10 specific use cases or pilots led by 10 European partners. And in this framework, we proposed a case study focused on historical bells heritage, as this topic involves multiple dimensions, as we heard, connecting tangible and intangible entities, geographical and more generally spatial feature aspects, and other topics of interest. And more specifically, we wanted to test how the General Catalogue of Cultural Heritage, which is the database that we manage as institution, could contribute to the understanding of this phenomenon, and how we could represent in a digital environment all these complex relations between entities. And following our institutional task, the research was intended to provide tools for various purposes like preservation, promotion, research, or general consultation on cultural heritage. To make a first assessment, we started from what we had in our general catalog. We had some quite rich data cards on related to bell, the description of bell performing techniques with audiovisual documentation, and a significant number of bells that were described using our standards, our descriptive standards. Using search filters, we retrieved approximately 5,200 something of this record describing bells, but most of the data were of good quality with rich descriptions, but we realized two critical issues. First, all the bells, with no exceptions, were described as artistic property. So there was no specific distinction in the musealized musical museum exhibited bells and bells in use. And secondly, there were almost no data that could quickly enlighten the relations with the buildings where the bells were located and with the other bells composing the complex, the set of bells. And more importantly, there was a complete absence of any information related to the acoustic and musical dimension of the instrument. So we began addressing these issues in different steps. As explained by Claudio, we led the process of recovering sound resources from different archives with local actors. So we collected bell sonatas, in some cases with interesting interviews, and these performances were catalogued by the help of ethnomusicologists, in this specific case, Dottoressa Elisa Salvalaggio and Dottoressa Elisa Di Piro, and we used a descriptive model called BDI, Beni Etnoantropologici Immateriali, which is descriptive model used for intangible ethnoanthropological heritage. And during the cataloging process, we tried, and it was quite complex, to identify lacking information such as the identification of specific repertoires, performing events, performing practices, performance, and so on. And we also tried to include relevant documentation like field notes. And then, to build a first set of relations, we tried to identify the architectures inside the catalog that were already described in the catalog and made a match with the place of the location of the bells used for these performances. And so we get this first relation with also with the geographical area. And then we analyzed how to catalog the bells. And for Liguria, we had nothing in the catalog, in the database, not even described as artistic property, so in some sense it was easier to start from zero. And therefore, starting from the relation with the place of the architectures and with the recordings, we experimented the application of a different descriptive model. So we didn't use the artistic property model, but indeed we applied the SM, strumenti musicali, musical instrument format, collecting a minimal set of data related to the acoustic component, like the nominal note for each bell. And we paid particular attention to the connection between the instrument represented by the bell concert, the set of bells, and all the individual bells that are part of it. And so we described this asset, the instrument, as a complex asset using a high-level card for the bell concert and the number of child or low-level cards for every bell. And during the cataloging process, we attached also sound recordings to the individual bell sheet with the nota di battuta, the sound, the main note for each bell. Now, I don't know if it's working, but it's okay, it's just very, very low. But the data we collected are part. Okay, this is just a visualization of all the relations between the main concert and all the set, all the bells that compose the concert. Other relations are, I don't know, maybe we can make aggregation from foundries. So all the bells which are produced from the same foundries and so on. So we can get a complex system of relation. The data collected, in fact, are part of what is commonly referred to as a knowledge graph, which is a graph composed by data and data relations, which is structured following a conceptual and formal model that is called an ontology. The ontology we created for bells, so we extracted the concepts and vocabularies, and that's quite difficult, but it's interesting. We create a first ontology based on our data model, and it is fully integrated in the broader ontology of the project, which is the polyphony ontology network. And using this technology, which is the semantic web technology, we can facilitate the establishment of increasingly broader connection between data and make them accessible through the web by publishing them as linked open data. And linked data or linked open data if we use specific licenses for free reuse under certain conditions. A very important thing of the project is that our dataset is available on the Ministry of Culture's Open Data Portal, also on GitHub, and it can be queried through a Sparkle endpoint by anyone who is developing an app, a web portal, website, or just wishes to query sound objects for creative reuse, and so on. And I quickly showed just a couple of examples of visualization, but you can play with that as you want. This is just an example. This is a portal which is developed by Unibo, alma mater, for querying data, which is called Melody. In this portal, we can have specific forms of visualization for statistics about the date of construction, the place of construction, the material, and so on. And another interface we are developing in-house is more focused on the geographical dimension with the place of production, for example, or other technical aspects like the nominal notes, the measurements, the mounting systems, and you can also play with keyboards with the notes of the bell. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much also for keeping in time. It's a wonder for a chair having panelists like this. And it's a really fascinating project, talking about musical instruments that are not so much considered in our field, but being a gamelan player, I think that are very much entitled, and I can also recall the idea of Stephen Feld that bells are the sound print of European music. One thing, a comment that I have also, I really struck by this project also because it's an interdisciplinary endeavor, but it's an interdisciplinary endeavor that encompasses also sound and music, which is, I say this for our colleagues that are non-Italian, it's a big novelty in the landscape of our ministry outside, because since now music is not considered by our law as a cultural heritage. It's just performance. But in the Codice dei Beni Culturali, the word music does not appear. And in the land of opera and music from thousands years ago, it was a shame. And now we are moving and moving forward, and was passed a decree a few months ago that established the figure of specialist in conservation and of music within the ranks of the ministry, but it's something that happened a few months ago. So I think the importance of this project is also to show how music can be part of an interdisciplinary project in which art history, anthropology, archaeology, but also sound and music are part of the same idea of a concept of heritage. And so thank you very much for this paper. I have a lot of questions, but I live in Rome, they live in Rome, so we can talk whenever. Anna. No.
It was maybe me.
Spinge. Go ahead.
May I? Giovanni.
Yeah.
Because we said Anna and...
Eva, sorry.
I just would like to say that I'm very happy with your presentation, because in Poland we have an ongoing project on cataloging bells in present and former boundaries of Poland, historically much broader. And this has been done from the art history perspective. My colleagues have like thousands and thousands of bells documented. But in our case, in their case, it is rather tangible heritage. So since your database is so advanced, I think it may be a great inspiration to what they are doing. And who knows, maybe in the future a kind of cooperation could develop to cover the really big area of Europe with documentation of those bells, some of which do not exist because they document also bells which were identified in certain historical building, churches, etc., which were destroyed. Bells which were during the Second World War, changed into cannons, weapons. I mean,
Yes,
yeah.
in Italy too.
So it's a huge historical documentation. So I hope that I had no idea that you are doing such a wonderful thing. Now I will come back home to Poland and we'll share the address of your project, and I really hope that it may altogether in Europe develop into something really big and very, very, very important. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Salwa.
Yeah, what a wonderful project, and what a wonderful also development that the Ministry of Culture of Italy is hiring ethnomusicologists. I think that all ministries of culture should follow suit, and I certainly will mention it in all occasions that I can. two things that I wanted to say were already said, Feld's work and the idea of expanding this to a European project. But more specifically, are you also including bells that are used by animals to mark their wanderings? That's one question, and the other is, how much are you using the knowledge from foundries? Because that's really a very crucial, I think, source of information. Yeah, and I wish that in Portugal my colleagues would do a project like yours. Really wonderful. Congratulations.
Thank you. Just quick answer for the first question. At this stage, we didn't consider that aspect in the project, but we, in the cataloging activities, we have already some infos about, how do you call in English?
Animal bells.
Animal bells, okay.
Yeah, bells too.
Because, but it would be very interesting to match the common properties of and including the ontology, absolutely. And the second question, the foundries, of course. We have just a convention now with an agreement with just one foundries at this stage, which is the Marinelli di Agnone in Molise region. But we want to go in the next month also to the Capani and Dall'Anconi, which are two other foundries that follow artisanal methods to build to cast the bells, and unfortunately the Marinelli lost all its archives due to a fire in the I don't remember the 60s, so we don't have many information are lost, but we collected all the cataloging card that they have because they have a small museum of because when they casted bells, they just took the old bells in the towers, but they didn't use the bronze to make new bells, but just preserve them. So they have a very interesting museum, and so we just cataloging all the bells of their museums, but we want to document all the process of casting.
Just a small information in case you're curious to look at it. The Portuguese tradition of bells used by animals is actually inscribed on UNESCO's list.
Okay.
So there was a small documentary. You can look it up.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
We just
okay.
We will have a
Giuseppe.
Thank you very much. Very, very interesting project. My question is, you said that today there are many associations of Campanaro in Liguria. Today, is there the competition between the association and what is the competition in the performance style, in the set of bells?
There are two associations that derive from a sort of a schission, okay? There is the older association that is more traditional, more bounded to the old style, the old way to play bells, and a newer association that was founded, I think, about 20 years ago, that that wants, I simplify, wants to quite change and modernize the way to play bells. They try to convince the priests, the church, to mount more bells on the bell tower, to make bigger sets, to play more articulate songs that are new songs or borrowed from the French repertoires. They are influenced by the French repertoires that have big bell towers with 14, 15 bells. So there is a competition, and the two associations don't appreciate each other. But it's a sign of vitality. Conflict is a sign of vitality, I think. Where there's conflict, there are lively musical cultures, I think.
Thank you very much for your presentation. My question is about database and structure of the data and metadata. Do you have some pattern for the data, the set of the data elaborated formally by some institution, or do you made it yourself?
No, we elaborate standards for the description of cultural heritage because it's the institutional mission of our institute of ICCD. So we had a previous schema for the musical instrument, but it was very general. It can be applied to all the musical instruments. So for example, for the nominal note, we didn't find a field, so we use another field and then we change the label to adapt. And I think and then we translate in a RDF format for the language of semantic web this data. But we have to integrate and go deeper in the description because, for example, we describe the set of bell and the bells, but we are missing a lot of information about the bell cell. So, which is the musical instrument? So we have to go forward and make a deeper analysis. And it is, I think, the first layer of description. But the good thing is when you work with ontologies, is that you can expand and go deeper in time. So
the first level is very very good. And the second question is about the recording, sound recording. Do you cooperate with some some specialists or some, I don't know, studio or
and
of course outside studio? Because it's very difficult to make good recordings.
Okay, we collected some sound documentation about bell ringing performances, which is historical documentation collected by this ethnomusicologist Mauro Balma since the 70s till now, and he recording this documentation with the most adjourned devices of relative to the time the documentation was recorded. And now he records with digital devices. And then we acquired also documentation produced by local actors, by the two associations of bell ringers. They are a sort of informal archives, which are very precious in my opinion. But when you have to deal with these informal archives, you don't always know everything about the devices or the registration techniques. They gave me about 400 cassettes, okay, and so the oldest were from the 70s. Most of them were from the 80s, from 90s. So I think registration technique was not professional. But they are precious as documents because most of them document very unique performances. So our policy is to acquire the largest number of documentation, disregarding the technical perfection. Okay.
I think that the project is a good opportunity to arrange some studies on the sound recordings of this kind of sound.
Then we did another thing when cataloging the bells. A collaborator of us made some recordings of the sound, not of bells ringing performances, but just of the sound of the bell. He took photographic documentation and made recordings of the sounds.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have to move on. Thank you again, Elena and Claudio. And now is the turn of Ardian Ahmedaya. I think he doesn't need much introduction. He is with our seminar, has been and is for a long time. He's one of the soul and the leader of the multi-part music study group of ICTM. Comes from the University of (👑🖏 𝐭𝐡 in Vienna. And the title of his paper today is O Salutaris Hostia, Music Traditions in Religious Context Among Albanians of Roman Catholic Faith in Montenegro. Please.
Thank you very much, Giovanni. So this is the title of my paper, and this is a structure, so it will be a short introduction. Okay, so this is the introduction, the field work from which the recordings I'm talking about emerged, and the odyssey of the recordings, 𝐭𝐡 𝐄𝐻 collection, recordings among Albanian communities in Montenegro, and paraliturgical songs of Roman Catholic Albanians performed in Latin. Albanians in Montenegro are settled mostly in southeastern and eastern parts of the country, alongside with the border with Albania and Kosovo, and make up around 5% of the population of Montenegro. About 74% of them belong to the Sunni Muslims faith and Muslim faith, and about 26 to the Roman Catholic one. So there are very small communities actually. Roman Catholic Albanians live for the most part in the area of Malësia and Shrestani, as well as in municipalities of Bar and Ulcinj. Ulcinj is the Albanian name of the town. They are members of the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Bar, whose bishops have been often Albanians, including the actual one. So it is this area here, mostly, where they are living. So it is this area here, mostly, where they are living. And we have the towns of Ulcinj, Bar, and Kotor is important for this presentation as well. Now, is it okay? Thank you. So about the field work. Among Roman Catholic Albanians in Montenegro, a hardly known tradition of singing Latin hymns in everyday life has been practiced during the second half of the 20th century. A team around Miloš Milošević, director of the historical archives in Kotor at the time, and 𝐭𝐡 𝐄𝐻, a musicologist, associate professor at Music Academy in Sarajevo, came in contact with them during a field work in the first part of the 1980s and recorded performances of these hymns. Other team members were Ljerka Vidic Rasmussen, you know her, she's a member also of the ICTM, Raina Glaser, she died when she was very young. At that time, both of them were students of Music Academy in Sarajevo, and Senad Gačević, student of Music Academy in Titograd, today Podgorica. Today is very well known in the country, composer and teacher and so on. Now, part of the team have been Albanian priests who have acted as cultural translators, sometimes answering more themselves the questions of the researchers instead of transmitting performance personal opinions. Such situations are known when you work with people of whom language you do not speak. The talks have been carried out in Serbo-Croatian, as the language used to be called at the time. The performers knew it, but when it has been about explanation of cultural specificities, they have used terms of their language variety, which in fact need explanations even in the official Albanian. Miloš Milošević was born in Croatia in a Croatian family in Split in 1920 and died in Kotor in 2012. He was an historian and archivist with broader research interests, including music. He had studied violin in Padova, here in Italy, and Romance languages studies in Belgrade. Miloš Milošević has represented Montenegro more than once at the beginning of the 1980s in the renowned Baroque music festival Varaždinske barokne večeri in Croatia. Between 1978 to 1985, which includes the time of the mentioned fieldwork, he was director of the historical archives in Kotor. Miloš Milošević and Ankica Petrović met in a meeting of composers and music writers in the former Yugoslavia in the early 1980s and discussed the idea to research mostly paraliturgical music of Catholic people in Montenegro. Ankica Petrović have said to me in one interview we did together, when Dr. Milošević was proposing the project, he was thinking about me because they did not have ethnomusicologists in Montenegro and he could not do it on his own. So project application was sent to the Academy of Sciences and Arts, but also the ministry was somehow involved. Again, from Ankica Petrović, the institutions were thinking that we will do fieldwork on Guzle and epics, Montenegrin epics. But we did fieldwork among Croats in Boka Kotorska, doing recordings of church music, and then we went to Malesoris. The term Malisor or Malsor, Malesor means in English Highlander. This term is used by Albanian inhabitants of the area I showed in southern Montenegro, which is known in Montenegrin as Malsia or Brda, both terms meaning highlands. The root of the Albanian term Malsia is Mal for mountain. This is an important designation among Malsor in Montenegro and on the other side of the border in northern Albania, because it has been used until the middle of the 20th century to also mean an area which was in the possession of a big family or a tribe in the highlands. In the fieldwork of the teams from Sarajevo and Montenegro among Albanians, the fieldwork took place in October 1983, September, October 1984, and September 1985. And then was stopped by the officials when they became aware that the team was working not only on epics. Petrović says that they never asked about the recordings, and Dr. Milošević also did not ask. So it took more than 40 years until I sent the recordings to the historical archive in Kotor after Dr. Milošević passed away. Carrying on research in other republics as the one the researcher was based was an unusual approach in Yugoslavia, although there was no written rule or any law against it. This attitude has been slowly changed since the 1980s. The fieldwork I am talking about is to be seen therefore as an exception and as an example of research behind the Iron Curtain in an Eastern Bloc state which had a special status in the Western Europe and USA, of course. Now, a bit about the Odyssey of the recordings. Among fieldwork records by Ankica Petrović, only some sound recordings could survive the turmoil of the ethnic war in Bosnia and Herzegovina, including the siege of Sarajevo in the 1990s, a situation which found Petrović unprepared. And she writes, the daily shelling of the city and citizens, the destruction of all aspects of civilization, and the complete siege of Sarajevo by the Serbian militant extremists and the Yugoslav People's Army brought fear among all citizens of Sarajevo and forced us only to struggle for mere life. A miracle happened for Petrovic when she became a letter by Theodore Levin, a professor at Dartmouth College at that time, delivered to her by an US reporter in Sarajevo. In the envelope was also an invitation of the Smithsonian Folkways for collaboration in the preparation and the publication of CD on Bosnian music, an official request for the issuance of an American visa, and an open-air ticket to the USA. This invitation helped Ankica Petrovic to leave Sarajevo with one of the rescue convoys organized by Sarajevo Jewish Community and Joint Distribution Committee. She was allowed to take only one bag, as everyone else there, with her, and in this bag was a small part of the recordings she had made until that point. Petrovic donated these recordings and other ones which could survive the war in Sarajevo to the ethnomusicology archive of the UCLA Halpert School of Music, the institution where she finished her teaching activity in the US in 2008. There, the recordings were digitized. The disadvantage related to the loss of the fieldwork notebooks hampered the provision of the written information on collection recordings. Nevertheless, my close relationship with informants and performers established during fieldwork research 30, 40, and even 50 years ago has greatly contributed to reawaken my memories and provision of the requested information in metadata system with technical help of my former student Dinko Didovic from Split in Croatia. This is what Ankica Petrovic has written. So I'm reporting all these details and examples of the first topic of this seminar, Ethnomusicologists Today, New Challenges in Research Methods and Communication. In addition, they are significant also for the issue of ethnomusicologists and war in connection with those of cultural memory and heritagization. The many initiatives concern the holdings of Ukraine archives, as we have heard also in this seminar at the moment, are among the most actual examples in this context. Now, about the recording and the collection. During an email exchange with Ankica Petrovic and a longer talk in Sarajevo in 2019, where a symposium of the ICTM study group, at the time ICTM, now ICTMD, study group on multipart music took place, I was very glad to know about the fieldwork and the recordings the teams from Sarajevo and Montenegro had carried out, and felt very honored to be asked to work with these recordings. These recordings are of particular significance for several reasons, including the fact that they are not known in other areas in the Balkans. I mean, this kind of tradition where Albanians Catholic lives. So everyday traditions of Albanians in Montenegro, including musical ones, are still today hardly known in the national and international level. The same can be said about the lack of interest on the side of the research. Most of the recordings, they are all audio recordings, are carried out in situ. They reflect a big part of the everyday traditions in religious and secular contexts, the later including diverse situations and contexts from weddings to farewell ceremonies for deceased family members. And in the interviews are mentioned today forgotten concepts, but which help to discern the ways people used to perceive the everyday traditions and therefore help to better trace the diachronic perspective and its impact on issues of musicianship. One of them is the dichotomy Malsor, Bregasor, for Highlander and shore people. While Highland and Highlander are still today important idioms, shore people is no more in use. There are several reasons for this change, among which I want to mention the fact that, especially after the political and social changes in the country, since the 1990s, many people from the highlands are settled in the shore areas, and with them the traditions they identify themselves with. About liturgical songs of Roman Catholic Albanians performed in Latin. Recordings in religious contexts take an important part in the collection I am talking about. Those of liturgical songs of Roman Catholic Albanians performed in Latin are performed by men in their 60s and older. They report that they have learned the hymns from missionaries coming from Italy in 1941, 1942, although they did not understand Latin. This time corresponds with the Italian governorate of Montenegro, which existed from October 1941 to September 1943 as an occupied territory under military government of fascist Italy during World War II. At this point, the issue of music or musical traditions and war and the role of missionaries becomes of significance. Due to the presentation's time limit, I cannot develop it here, but I would be happy to discuss it during the discussions afterwards. Now I want that we listen to a recording of the hymn O Salutaris Hostia. The recording is carried out in October 1984 in St. Anthony Church of the village of Tusi, which is today a town, near Podgorica in Montenegro. 𝐿'Nică is the man who sings. He was born in Tusi in 1933 and sings while obviously reading the text. I hope we can hear it. I have to jump now and to find the... Yep. So I don't know how much Latin is there, but I couldn't speak of, I cannot speak, of course, with the singer. As I mentioned, that they have said that they don't understand the language there, but they know, of course, the content of the hymns and so on. So I just wanted that we listen to an example. Now, the melody, like those of other paraliturgical songs, is similar to those of secular singing traditions of the same believers. On the same day and at the same place have been recorded a good number of paraliturgical and liturgical chants, including songs devoted to Saint Anthony, to church celebration days, to communion, to the Blessed Virgin Mary, and 14 stations of the Sun Cross. Now, after 40 years, the question is, what can be done with these recordings? Here again, the role of the priest and of the representatives of the Albanian Catholic Church in Montenegro become of importance. After the recordings, digitization, Ankisa Petrovic had met by chance during a trip in Europe the priest of the town of Tusi, who had been present during the recordings in the 1980s, right at the beginning of his career. When he learned that the recordings still exist, he had asked Ankisa Petrovic for the copies, which I could give him last year when I was in Montenegro, so that this kind of singing can be used in the liturgy, although this tradition is forgotten in the area and people there do not understand Latin. Such a perspective is expected to have an impact on issues of musicianship, also because another idea of the priest is to involve Albanian composers in composing music for the Mass based on these hymns and the melodies used in them. These efforts are to be seen from the perspectives of cultural memory and heritagization as well, because of the expected impact on the otherness of Albanian Catholics in Montenegro, which they like to emphasize. So, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ardian, first of all, for reminding us of the wonderful work that our dear colleague Ankica Petrovic made under so many difficulties in her life. Also presenting this idea of retrieval of a collection, archival collection, which is an important aspect of our world. So, any question? Serena.
Okay.
No, it's a very short question. Thank you very much. It's very interesting, all the work and all the problem. Thank you. Now, my question is, what about the nowadays Catholic repertoires? Because this is we had the Vatican II, and you know all it's changed, and this is important also for the memories of what was in the 40 in Italy and then brought in Albania.
Yes, so there are parallel liturgical songs as a tradition in these communities in Albania, the same as on the other side of the border in northern Albania. But this is a subject still not really researched, not only in ethnomusicology, but at all, because it is. But for this Albanian community of Catholic faith, especially, it is important to have and to emphasize such traditions because of this otherness. Because we should think Albanians were in the former Yugoslavia, of course, in a not a very in a disadvantaged position, let's say, and it was since the most of them are Muslims, so it was the way of thinking in black and white. Okay, Muslims, we don't have, so we are all Christians and so on. And they want to say, okay, there are also Christians among Albanians and there are Catholics among Albanians, so even a bit special and so on. And this is the reason why they do have in Albanian paraliturgical songs, and they so they are very active actually. So at home or also around the church, and they do have.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about a connected question. How much the situation of the Catholic Albanians in Montenegro changed since the 80s?
Yeah, since the 80s. So it has to do with the political decisions in the country itself. So also this idea of going near to European Union and so on have helped them in their rights, of course, and they are very active. And there are also connections with Catholic community in Albania, which is very strong, and there are also connections. And also in Ulcinj, this town in the very south, the majority are Muslims there, but there are Catholics there. And when I've done field work, I have found also school children playing church music there because they don't have so many people. So it is a movement, so to say, for a more natural and broader participation in this, in the church life and including music.
So basically the size of this community, so to say, is approximately the same? Or
It's
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I have one question. You mentioned that you didn't have time to elaborate on this because of the time of the paper, but it seems a situation kind of unusual that in just 2 years, in the 2 years of the war, which the Italians were not being that well seen in that area, also in that period, a repertoire had established there. Can you tell us a little more about it? Was it that somehow the Italians, as Catholic coming from the land of the Pope, gave them a sort of identity, and because of this, the music was really so established and kept?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I have not a definite answer to this, but we have to think that What the Italian fascism did was the idea of making a bigger Albania. So everywhere where Albanians were living in the Balkans, to have a state. So this was so in interest of the Albanians, so to say, to have this big state. So this kind of tradition has to do also with political decision of the time. This is one thing we have to take into account. The second thing is, what we are talking and what I am telling now, it is of this being different from others. And obviously it has gone until the 80s and no more, because if you have no reason, and people don't understand the language and so on, but since we have these recordings, we can try to reconstruct at least what is being done. And as I said, the priest there, he wants to reconstruct even more to make it something else. Yeah, this is.
Okay. More questions? The screen that. Okay, so if there are no questions, no more questions, thank you again,
Thank you.
Adrian.
Thank you.
And we move on to the last speaker of this panel, Francesca Billeri. She did her master in Rome and then her PhD at SOAS. Her field of research is Khmer traditional music, and she will present us today her new research in progress, from stage to screen, mediatized representation of the Cambodian Lakan Basak theater.
Sorry, just a moment. Sì, usiamo il mio?
Poi ce l'hai per leggere?
No, non ce l'ho.
Lo passi qua?
L'audio.
Ah, l'audio.
Sorry for the waiting, but maybe in the meantime I can start with the introducing the main points that I will show this morning in my talk. First of all, thank you I'm very pleased to be here today, as I'm a Sicilian living abroad. When I have the chance to come here, I'm very glad of participating, joining this conference. And my talk aimed to examine Cambodian Khmer theatrical genres in present-day Cambodia that, as for other countries, is experiencing a mediatization of culture which has brought traditional cultural forms, including musical and theater genres, ritual music and theater genres, into new social and performing contexts. This not only makes them available to a larger percentage of society, but also transforms the very nature of these cultural practices and reflects social and political aspects of contemporary Cambodia. Traditional genres that were once embedded in oral tradition and functioned within ritual ceremonies and theaters and traditional theater performing context, which consist of a mat surrounded by the audience in rural villages, are nowadays being moved onto modern stages and screens and into new media formats. So how do old and new forms of media affect traditional theater ritual genres, and how is the mediated performance of cultural heritage affected by socioeconomic and political contingencies? In this talk, I will show the passage from traditional to mediated, remediated Lakamba performances through the migration to different media systems by analyzing the changes of some original aspects, such as the use and function of peculiar instruments and songs, and the politically controlled themes of the story plots on television programs, the shortened length of the scenes, consequently of the songs in the television context. Successively, I will discuss the remediation of television live recorded performances on social media, specifically Facebook, which is the most popular social media in Cambodia, by discussing the different strategies adopted by Lakamba Sak artists to promote the Lakamba Sak genres and their artistic talent, and as well as the political use of Lakamba Sak theater on social media. But before showing the extra musical aspects that are changed in this passage from traditional performances in traditional settings to mediated performances on television and social media, I will briefly introduce the Lakamba Sak theater origins. I think something happened again. Si vede?
Qua, vedi?
No, I can't see.
Ecco. Okay.
Si muove?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry. So, Lakamba Sak Theatre, so this is the area of, the Phnom Penh is the capital of Cambodia. It is the area of my research. I'm working with the famous, well-renowned Lakamba Sak group, which is based in Phnom Penh. So Lakamba Sak theater is characterized by alternating dialogues, recitatives, songs, acrobatics, pantomimes, as in the Chinese theater. The name of Lakamba Sak derives from the Basak River area in South Vietnam, where it originated at the end of the 19th century. The Basak River is a multi-ethnic area where the local Khmer population, known as Kampuchea Crown, Lower Cambodia, absorbed and abducted foreign influences and components into their traditions, including theatrical. This area was given to Vietnam by the French colonial rule, and the Vietnamese origin of Lakamba Sak also reflects the historical hate-love relation between Cambodia and Vietnam. Although the Vietnamese are considered in the West as the magnanimous liberator of Cambodia from the Khmer Rouge regime in 1979, they still protect the substantial interest in Cambodia, ranging from land border areas, allowances to illegal Vietnamese migration. The former Prime Minister Hun Sen served as Minister of Foreign Affairs during the Vietnamese occupation between 1979 and 1989, becoming Prime Minister in 1985 until last July 2023, when he resigns. as Prime Minister. La Sak, but we'll talk about this a bit later. La Sak is not an icon of Cambodian culture abroad. It's not UNESCO heritage. So it's very famous within the country, but less internationally. The reason why I chose these genres as a case study is that La Sak historically demonstrates has great adaptability in appropriating and indigenizing features from other art forms and other cultures. It has been used as propaganda during different regimes, including the Khmer Rouge regimes between 1975 and 1979. Therefore, I think it's particularly interesting to look at the intricate ways such malleability applies to the adaptation of La Sak to new performing contexts, such as television, its political use on social media. Also, this process of mediatization is impacting ritual forms, such as the wedding music, which is my second case study, but which, for time constraints, I will not talk about today. So outside the outside the TV contest, La Sak is performed whenever hosts requested. Although the most renowned troops of the villages are engaged to perform after Buddhist celebration in the spaces surrounding the temples. A wooden stage is built by a group of workmen engaged, supervised by the troops leader. In the surrounding of the temple, there are different traditional food stalls, other amusement to entertain followers. The audience is composed of followers who join the ceremony in the temple, as well as people coming from the neighboring villages. People gather at the temple in the evening, bringing food, bamboo mats, blankets to spend the night on the floor to see the performance. La Sak performances usually start around 8 or 9 in the evening and last for at least 9 hours, but in the past the stories can even last months. In 2015, I attended a live episode of Khmer Cultural Heritage, a musical context broadcast on one of the main national channels, Bayon TV. In this episode, the La Sak stories were shortened to just 10-15 minutes as they served to advertise the groups within the empty moments of the program. The TV producer gave detailed instructions to the performance on the position on the stage, the structure and the length of the scenes, and consequently the corresponding songs. And sometimes musicians were also asked to play quickly to fit the time frame. One of them explained the process as follows. In the TV, we musicians have to play carefully, perform to get the audience attention so that we can be invited to play frequently. We have to follow the director's instruction. The songs are chosen by the TV director, who has to follow the time frame. For example, one song can be sung by one actor, but when we play in the villages, the troops leader chooses the songs. The actor can sing 2 or 3 songs in one scene, or even more, because we have lots of time. In order to play in television, musicians must be able also to play Western instruments, as television ensembles are composed of a combination of traditional and Western instruments, such as the electric bass, the mandolin banjo, the guitar, the keyboard, and the drum set. So the sak and the lao, which are this small gong made of copper or bronze that you can see in the picture, nowadays mostly replaced by the idiophones, chang, the cylindrical audiophone chang, are characteristic defining features of the Basak genres, are essential for the development of the story. One performer said that it is possible to perform La Basak with these 3 instruments only, without the melodic instruments. In fact, these instruments accompany the entrance exit of the character, as well as the opening and closing of the curtain, and symbolize real sounds to help the narration of the story and to create an atmosphere to highlight emotions, gesture, and sound effects. In the television performances, also the heterophonic nature of Khmer traditional music, expressed through the simultaneous improvisation of melodic instruments on a rhythmic pattern, as well as the characteristic sounds of the skorbasak drum and the idiophones, were replaced by the use of a drum set, changing the Khmer traditional music texture. Now I will play these 2 short videos showing the entrance of the main character of the story Prachina Wong. One is in traditional setting, and the second video is based on a TV, within the TV competitions. So you can see the changes relating to instruments and music texture I've just talked about. Internet, c'è internet? C'è connessione? Perché sono su Facebook, cioè. Speriamo che ce l'hanno. No, c'è l'audio. Anzi, è quello che è importante.
Adesso quello l'altoparlante esce.
Non è possibile. Può essere che ha silenziato. Aspetta, clicca sul video. Qua.
No, non già era.
Ah, era così.
Paura di come forse. Infatti. Ok, ora passati l'audio là.
the next video was a video that I filmed on the Bayonne television studio. So if the audio doesn't work now? Ah. Okay, so hopefully.
No, devi uscire dal PowerPoint, non ce l'hai fuori dal PowerPoint.
Ah, sì, sì.
Perché se ce l'hai...
Devo fare questo?
Questo?
Mhm. Si vede?
No, vedi qua. Sì. Devi chiudere la presentazione. Devi chiudere
Ah, proprio lo devo chiudere, certo.
Ma si vede?
No.
Allora, ce l'ho. Schermo. Vediamo questi schermi. Aspetta un attimo, provo a vedere là.
Ma non l'avevi trovato per il nome. Ecco. Vai.
Vedete la presentazione?
Sì.
Okay. So, apart from the length and the heterophonic texture, which is replaced by the combination of traditional and Western instruments, in the traditional performing context, the stories are chosen by the group's leader or people who have requested the shows, such as the temple's administrator, mainly according to the audience preference. La Kambasok stories are based on traditional legends and stories, episodes from the epic poem 👑🖏 or their translations of Chinese, or their translation of Chinese works that are adapted to different themes, such as comedy, tragedy, love, and war. In the television context, the story is checked and reshaped by the TV producers. Bayonne TV producers explain the process as follows. Each scenes need to be carefully checked, every word is checked to make sure that everything is appropriate to the television context, not criticized by the government. That's what the leader of the troupe, Paul Samang, said. On television, we follow the story scripts, the themes, whilst in the TV, and in the traditional settings, the actor mainly improvise. They have like a list of themes of the scenes, and they improvise on that. In the television, they need to follow the scripts the script. The themes of the stories include struggles, love, education, justice, injustice, pressures, and persistence. The government leaderships check the stories and ask for the summary of the story with the supporting documents. After the check is approved, the story can be broadcast. And of course, sensitive topics are avoided. Once I went to the Apsara TV, is a local TV channel, and the newsroom of this local television channel, a sign reportedly hangs from the wall saying, "Banned from broadcasting, stories of human rights and land disputes," which are very hot topics in Cambodia. TVK, which is the main national channel, is managed by the Ministry of Information that ensure a strict pre-broadcast censorship of sensitive issues, including the pre-check of Lakhan Basak, the theater story plots. They need to conform to my social and cultural values, such as the loyalty of women towards men, the gratitude of children to their parents, etc. Other TV channels are also controlled by the political leadership, owned by the Prime Minister, former Prime Ministers, family members, or members of the ruling Cambodian People's Party. Similarly, political control is exerted on social media, which surpassed all the media as a news source for Cambodians in 2017. The former Prime Minister Hun Sen has established a cyber team who controls the information shared on social media. Artists post videos, news relating to him, they follow his Facebook page, they praise and support his party and his activity, and their affiliation as a way of promoting themselves, the group, to gain more popularity, have more visibility also on television. These are some examples on his posts on his many Facebook pages he has. So Oh Samang is the leader of the troop, and he's very passionate on sharing his work and his commitment in promoting Lakhan Basak theater in Cambodia. Actually, at the moment, he's advisor of the Ministry of Information, so this who is in charge of granting TV and radio licenses and ensuring the pre-broadcast censorship on TVK, the main television channel. Oh Samang is also recently appointed the honorary branch leader by the head of young entrepreneurs of the ruling CPP party. So this political affiliation allows him, his group, to frequently hold TV performances. And the other members of his groups are also working for the Ministry of Culture and Fine Arts or the Royal University of Fine Arts, which are the two main cultural institutions in Cambodia, or other ministries. In one of his, I want to just show you the two ways he used to promote Lakhan Basak on Facebook and on YouTube. So the first use of Lakhan Basak on social media is through video covers. To popularize the Basak song, appeal to the audience, he created these covers and he published on his YouTube channel. You can see that he portrays himself with an outfit similar to that of the famous popular music singer of the 1950s, Sensei Samut, and the national symbols of Cambodia, such as palm trees, Angkor temples, these flowers, the magnolia, the champa flowers as background. In these videos, Lakhan Basak songs are extracted from television theater performances and sung on their own. So the practice of extracting the song from the theater performance is called 𝟑🖑 𝐭𝐡 Basak singing. So the first part of these videos consists of excerpts of television performances, and the second part suddenly switches to what you see in the cover, is portrayed while singing modernized Lakhan Basak songs. For technical issues, I will not show you this video now, but I want to just highlight that this video are sort of can be considered as an extension of the televised Lacan Bassac performances is an extension of all the media, so the theater performances are transferred to the social media context by extracting the songs from that theater context, theater performances. And then he used one of the remediation strategies argued by Bolter and Grusin, the UP immediacy, which mainly consists of these photo montages, which the focus is on the presence of the medium. So Olsamang created this video by using specific software such as Photoshop or video editor, and as he explained in an interview last year, he said the modern and the traditional are visually musically mixed, so the Lacan Bassac can attract the viewers online, and I can get more likes and shares on Facebook and YouTube. And this tendency of using photo montage has increased also during the pandemic, where he created videos showing himself singing modernized Lacan Bassac songs with the coronavirus images as background, mixed to extracts of the government announcement about the COVID-19 measures. However, in order to ensure popularity, as I just mentioned, political affiliation is very important. So posting this picture when he was awarded by the former Prime Minister in 2014, or talking with the Minister of Culture, which last year has also organized the first festival of Lacan Bassac in Phnom Penh. Hopefully she will continue with that initiatives. He has a way of showing his political affiliation and also his ability as a performer, as an artist, which is prized by the politicians. The second political use, to finish, is writing song lyrics to accompany these videos produced by national radio or national televisions in Cambodia. On the one I hope I am able to show is in occasion of the Liberation Day. The Cambodians called the Victory Day over the Khmer Rouge regime, which was overthrown in 1979 by the Vietnamese army, as previously mentioned. So in this video, the former Prime Minister is presented as a peace builder, helping Cambodians to have a second life after the devastating Khmer Rouge regime, when 90% of the artists were killed. So this is the summary, to summarize the meaning of the lyrics in this video. So I suppose I have to again go out from presentation. I don't know if I can manage myself, I don't think. No, I'm trying to copy the link again. Yes, see. Where is it? It was 9. Maybe it's now
Gone.
because I downloaded it. Because, of course, everything I found I downloaded. But unfortunately, I cannot show you. But it was the Prime Minister with all these people praising him while he's singing in Lacan Bassac style. And the last, I have also another video. But yeah, just to finish, where. The Lacan Bassac characters invite Cambodians to go to vote for the July 2023 election, where the Prime Minister took over his position to his son, who is now the current Prime Minister. So to conclude, the process of mediatization on all the new media of Lacan Bassac shows how aspects of the original are controlled and manipulated by performance, media producers, and social media, user to promote artists, appeal to targeted audience. The political influence of the media system and cultural programs reflect the current state of the art in Cambodia, as well as the position and political strategies of artists working on television, who are in between preserving and modernizing traditional art forms, while shaping their performances and their lives according to the ruling party's political ideology and then control on the media. The role of media in fostering artists to show individual talent, creativity, entrepreneurial skills, to build the business, advance their careers, and also the political use of Lac Ambassador on Facebook. And of course, the intricate relation between music, media, and politics in contemporary Cambodia. Sorry for all the mess with the technology, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Francesca, for presenting us this very interesting case study of how certain traditional theater goes into the mediascape. And also, I think it's interesting because it's kind of mirroring in certain ways the first paper that we heard this morning. Any question? Salwa.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Actually, there are so many parallels in so many African and Asian countries with state control and the media.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just wondering whether outside this very controlled sphere, if there are informal representations or presentations of this theatrical form that escape censorship, essentially. Mm-hmm. That's what I'm wondering about, and maybe are used to transmit messages that counter this what seems like a very oppressive regime.
Yes, in the villages there are performances which are not so strict like in the television, but of course they are never politically. I can say they never criticize directly the government, because unfortunately it's a very authoritarian government, and many activists has been recently killed, even in the media press, and so there is no opposition party, so the leaders are in exile. The leader of the opposition party are in exile. This prime minister is in power since 1985, and now he took away his son. He gave his position to his son to continue his work. So there is not that freedom, even outside television, of criticizing. There will be, in a few years, I saw more protests, more like some more activism in that sense, but always among the few people who are easily killed or stopped from doing that. So I can say this is the situation.
Giovanni, can I ask a follow-up question?
Yeah.
How do you navigate your own fieldwork in this complex situation?
This is a topic that I started recently, and because it's not the topic of my PhD dissertation, is a different topics. I deal, in my dissertation I dealt with that genre, but not with that topic specifically. So I came across television performance during my PhD, my field work as a PhD student, and then it's not easy to, for example, get interviews or contact politicians or people working for the government. If you try to do that, they will give you many appointments, but they never come. Then you have to ask again. Then you have to be very polite, very. So that's the culture. But even there is, they are very strict with the hierarchies. Even between a student and professor, there cannot be kinds of friendship or kinds of discussion. It's always professor and students. The boundaries are very, very, very strict. So the thing is find the right contacts that help. I have some contacts already. TV producers are usually very happy to do the interviews, but of course when I ask them about sensitive topics or political topics, they always answer in a very diplomatic way. They never say, yeah, you're right, the Prime Minister, check everything. So they are it's a really hard, a very sensitive topic as well. So yes, I have to deal it with very carefully and also find the right way of getting the information in the political area. Regarding the artists, it's very easy. They are happy to answer the question, but again, depends on the question.
Thank you.
Okay, time for our last question.
Thank you for the presentation. It would seem as if modernizing traditions often implies streamlining traditions. You were talking about like the malleability and the openness of this particular form of cultural expression, which makes it conditioned to adapt to new technological and social contexts, etc. But then you also talked about or showed how like the streamlining of performances by television conventions, for instance, seem to, in a way, disrupt this logic in a way. What I'm trying to say is that it seems to me that many traditional forms of cultural expression are adaptable precisely because they are not based on explicit rules and principles, but based on improvisation, etc., over shared foundations, being able to respond to immediate contexts, etc. And there is a sense of a distinction between like the composed and regulated nature of like modern context staged performances of traditional culture. And I'm not sure, do you think that this also translates to social media performances, which on the face of it seems more like open and flexible compared to the television format, but I don't know how to word the question, but I find it to be an interesting aspect of this. I don't know if you agree on my initial statement that modernizing traditions might imply, in many cases, to streamline and define the tradition in a way that might seem foreign to the tradition from the outset. I don't know.
So you mean that in the traditional settings, performers are like there are much improvisation in both musical sphere and also in the actor and in the script. They don't follow the script. Why in television it is most everything is not improvised and everything is already prepared, well checked, so.
And it's better suited to promote a particular political message or stance when things are controlled and defined and streamlined, compared to a more, let's say, messy traditional practice that is adjustable to context and.
Yeah, of course, there are two. In the television, they have to. Again, as I said before, there is not an explicit political message through these performances. But of course, if in the stories there are like themes, they are political or that's relating to Khmer values, culture, like the way of dressing, the women behavior or the relation between women and men, they must be careful because they want to be conform with what is the principal traditional Khmer values, because this performance also aim to engage the audience, the young, so must be also educational in a way. They cannot show something which is not within what they believe it is, the traditional, the principle, what is educational. I don't know if I answered the question.
Yes, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you again, Francesca.
Thank you for listening.
And before the coffee break, I give the floor to Ignazio that has some small announcement.
Very small, just for remember that the court meeting is at 1 here, the court meeting, and the General Assembly will be at 6 here. I invite you to take part to our assembly because it's very important. Okay, so see the member groups here at 1.